15 minutes past 7. The government's free childcare scheme is in crisis. That's the strong words of the Preschool Learning Alliance, who have led a study which suggests government funding only covers the cost of 4 out of 5 children accessing free early education places.
The Alliance says this means that childcare providers are having to make up the shortfall that could mean extra charges for parents. Joining us on the line now is Michael Freeston, who's the Director of Quality Improvement at the organisation. Michael, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Are you there, Michael?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning to you. In crisis, these are strong words, aren't they?
They are strong words, and I think it's important to recognise this is the first bit of research that's actually looked at the cost of providing childcare. We get lots of reports in terms of what the price is, and this has identified, this was a random sample of 100 settings, all good settings, providing early years childcare under the government's pre-entitlement scheme. And what we looked at was what the actual costs were over a 2-week period in July. And what we found that was for 3 and 4-year-olds, the average cost per hour was £4.53, and for 2-year-olds it's £5.97. And for 3 and 4-year-olds, the actual money they receive is on average £3.88. So that's a 17% shortfall between one and the other, hence your figure of 4 out of 5 children being funded.
So what exactly does that mean for parents then?
What this means for parents is the risk that clearly this is an unsustainable position going forward for providers. At the moment, it appears that those providers are meeting the shortfall in the cost from their own resources, doing unpaid overtime, not making any investment into training and support, or even making a profit in themselves. So either they will start to withdraw from the sector themselves, or costs will have to go up for parents.
How did we get in this situation that hour on hour these care providers are losing money per child?
Well, I think all the parents you'll talk to are hugely grateful for the free entitlement funding that they get from government via their local authorities. And what we seem to have had is that the figure that was plucked out of £5.09 an hour, which is the amount the government provide, was based on very little data. In fact, there was no data, so they just put a figure out of the air that they felt that they could afford. This is the first time that there's been systematic analysis to see whether that figure is enough, and it has fallen short by about 20%. So I think that what we have in many situations, we've also invited information from local authorities, and what we find is in many of those cases, the local authorities are actually paying more than they get from local authorities, from the central government, to actually offset the shortfall themselves. So there is clearly not enough money in the system, and if we're going to have a successful scheme rolling forward, then clearly we have to look as a nation about how we want to fund this properly.
Isn't it interesting? A lot of people who pay for childcare will say that nurseries and preschools and anywhere that provides childcare are really expensive, so it's hard to imagine they could ever struggle.
The figures are astonishing. I mean, I remember some research that was presented in the national media recently where 25% of household income in this country is spent on childcare. When you compare that with somewhere like France, for example, it's about 12%. And there was a recent OECD report which ranked the UK 4th in terms of its affordability, accessibility and range of provision. And the countries who were ahead of us were Finland, Sweden and Norway. And in those countries, the state provision is double what it is in the UK.
What do you think needs to happen, Michael?
Well, we've provided this information, hopefully, as a basis for all political parties to actually have an honest and realistic debate. We have a new Minister of State, Sam Gyimah, who has openly invited the sector to prevent evidence-based information on which we can take childcare policy forward. And so we would invite the DfE and all political parties to look at this data, to actually realise that there is not enough money in the system, and we need to have a grown-up debate about how we are effectively going to fund provision for our earliest children, because all the research evidence and all the rhetoric demonstrates that if you invest effectively in the early years, then you get the greatest return throughout that child's life.
Michael, thank you for your time. Michael Freeston, Director of Quality Improvement for the Preschool Learning Alliance. They've led that study which suggests government funding only covers the cost of 4 out of every 5 children accessing free early education places. Basically, the average hourly cost of providing funded childcare for a 2-year-old is about £5.97 per hour, compared to the average funding rate of £5.19, a funding shortfall of 15%, in some places rising to 18%. Thanks to Michael for joining us this morning.